First of all, I want to welcome the opportunity to speak on this finance bill, Minister, and to again offer a critique of this government's budget and the measures, some of the measures which are in the budget, and indeed, more importantly for us, some measures which should have been in this budget and of course were not, because the government, in our view, made the wrong choices and failed to give workers and families a break that they needed. And I want to start with the carbon tax increase, Minister, and I made my point in my budget speech on Budget Day that the carbon tax was unfair, that the carbon tax was regressive, that the carbon tax would make many working families poorer, and that the analysis before the budget from your own department, and indeed I think even an acceptance from yourself before the budget, was that the carbon tax was regressive, and those on lowest incomes would be the ones that would have to pick up the tab and pay the price. We have to win people over, Minister, in relation to reducing our carbon emissions. We have targets which we have to meet. Those targets need to be met. And the only way we are going to reach those targets is making sure that people do change their behaviour and reduce their carbon footprint. But also there's responsibility for big corporations and for real polluters as well. But the point that you miss in all of this, Minister, is that increasing carbon taxes is not going to change people's behaviour. It will make people poorer. If they don't have the alternatives, that's all it will do, but it won't make the state any greener or cleaner, and that's the fundamental flaw in your argument. On Budget Day, in your own speech, and there wasn't an opportunity for us to come back, I think in your closing remarks you talked about those who opposed the carbon tax were against taxes that change people's behaviour. That's not the case. We supported, as you know, the sugar tax. We supported the plastic bag levy. And the reason why we supported that tax and that levy is because they work, because there's an alternative there for people. If you drink Coke, you have Coke Zero. If you drink Fanta, you have Fanta Zero. If you drink any sugar drink, if there's an alternative there, then people obviously have an opportunity to use it. The same with the plastic bag levy. But this doesn't happen in relation to the carbon tax, because the vast majority of people, and you know this, Minister, cannot change, don't have the means, don't have the finances to change from maybe heating their home from oil and gas to alternatives. The vast majority of people can't afford electric cars. Indeed, even the target that was in your own climate action plan of having 1 million electric cars on the road over the next 10 years, we hear from the Department of Transport can't be met. But even if that was possible, people can't afford them unless they come dramatically down in price. We have people who live in rural Ireland who don't have access to public transport. I live in a rural village and no bus comes through that rural village. None, of any description. And people depend on their cars because they don't have the alternative. If they had alternatives, then we could look at increasing carbon taxes to change people's behaviour. But when you do it in the way that you did, all you're doing is increasing revenue. And don't tell us you're ring-fencing it for proposals that will reduce people's carbon footprint or will be good for climate mitigation. That can be done anyway, Minister, from progressive taxation and from the options which your government had, and we put those options to you. I also said on Budget Day, Minister, and I listened to Dr Doherty talk about the very convoluted schemes that are in place for executives who can avoid paying their income tax. And then we have the banks then who are making huge amounts of money and get corporation tax exemptions, and the bank levy isn't what it should be. That's because you represent a causative privileged class. That's who Fine Gael represent. I said that to you on Budget Day, and I genuinely believe that. Because if you really were interested in the plight of ordinary working people, and you had even the remotest understanding of what a lot of families who live up and down the estate go through on a weekly basis, you would have presented a different budget. The homeless people that Dr Doherty talked about and the child that was seen eating food from a cardboard is not the only child who is in that circumstance, or people who are in similar circumstances. There are families at the moment, Minister, who are no longer renting homes, they're renting rooms. We have landlords who are not renting houses anymore, they're renting rooms in houses. People are paying €800, €900 a month to rent a room in our capital city, and families are living in rooms. That's the reality. I don't think you grasp that reality, Minister, but it is a reality for those families. What was in the budget for them? Absolutely nothing. Zilch. You've done nothing for any of those families who need the homes that they need. Health was an issue that needed very significant attention. I have on numerous occasions raised the lack of capacity in University Hospital Waterford. We have pressures in Galway Hospital, pressures in Limerick Hospital, pressures in hospitals, acute hospitals across the state. We have people lying in hospital trolleys, record numbers of people. And this isn't Sinn Féin or anybody else making this up. You know this, the figures speak for themselves. The INMO released the figures month in, month out, and they show record numbers of people lying in hospital trolleys. And what did the budget do to mitigate that? Very little. The same last year, and we said this to you last year, Minister, when it was again a standing still budget. I think even worse, that there was going to be less money going into health in real terms when you look at increased demand and demographics and so on. The same is going to happen this year. So we're going to have Fianna Fáil waltz in and rock into this chamber, and we'll probably have members of Fine Gael come in as well, and they'll give crocodile tears about the fact that we have again record numbers of people in hospital trolleys, or record numbers of people who are homeless and don't have a home. The time to deal with these issues is on budget day, to put your money where your mouth is, to tax those who can afford to pay a bit more, raise the revenue which is necessary, and then provide for citizens. But of course that's not what you did. And you then, Minister, like you always do, like this government does, pretend there's no alternative. We proposed, in terms of rent, an emergency freeze on rents for 3 years. I see today in Berlin they've gone for that option over a 5-year period. This government, of course, turned its back on that because it doesn't believe in helping renters, but certainly believes in supporting landlords. We looked for a tax refundable tax credit of 1 month's rent with a limit to help renters as well. The government says no. We looked at a package of measures to reduce the cost of childcare. The government says no. We wanted 2 free GP visits for every citizen in the state to enable us to get to the point that Sláinte Care promised. The government says no. It commits to Sláinte Care in theory, but in practice, when it comes to delivering, it's nowhere to be seen. And what does you do, Minister? What was a standout in this budget in terms of the unfairness, which the ESRI said was a deeply regressive budget? You increased the carbon tax. That's what you did. And you didn't do all the other things that would have gave those workers and families a break.
Thank you very much, Deputy Cullinane. And Deputy Doherty will now move to Deputy John Burton. You have 20 minutes.